Yo, I'm your host, Dirty Mike.
I had a feeling Harry was going to leave that in.
I thought surely he wouldn't leave the, so what was it, skunk placenta? What?
Raccoon, raccoon placenta. Have you seen that clip?
Find anything?
Yeah, we found a lot of stuff. From bodily fluid and hair samples, we determined that a bunch of old homeless dudes had an orgy in the car.
Oh, God.
Yeah. You know what that's called when they do that in there? It's called a soup kitchen. It's pretty rough stuff.
Okay, so that movie came out in like, what, 2015 or 16?
It's old. Yeah,
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't call that
yeah,
old, Jordan.
I know. It's like Step Brothers.
Yeah.
Old. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I have seen that movie, but I feel like Will Ferrell has made several movies like that, and so has Mark Wahlberg. So I'm
Oh yeah.
not sure if I've seen that actual one. But if I did, I blocked the part that you guys were talking about.
Oh, it's probably my favorite Will Ferrell movie.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
And not
Wow.
because he's funny in it, but just the whole entire movie is a lot of lulls.
Okay. I'll have to check it back out.
I'll send
Yeah.
that clip. I'll send that clip to you.
Okay, cool.
You'll get
That's
some
the
good chuckles.
Yeah, well, I've been relying on Impractical Jokers for my lulls lately.
Oh yeah.
And also, I've got a bad case of the giggles lately, just someone's at the door. And of course, Harry's got cough due to cold. So,
Yeah,
hey, Eric, how are
Hello.
ya?
you.
Good, good, good. I'm sorry our fearless leader couldn't be here. He's got cough due to cold. Very specific.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. It's due to cold, not to COVID.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yes. Well, let me give you the official welcome here. Today, I'd like to welcome to the show Brooklyn Brewery CEO Eric Ottaway. Of course, you lead one of the OG craft breweries as Brooklyn's, what, 35 years old now ish?
Yes, our 35th this year.
Wow. And a top 10 craft brewer, got your fingers in all sorts of pies. So hope to hear more about that today. So welcome. Hope you had a good holiday.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I did indeed. I just had the last bowl of turkey soup, I think. So
Nice.
thankfully,
So there's my first question, Eric. How long after Thanksgiving can you safely eat the turkey?
I'd say you got to get it done within about a week.
You're like, what's today?
No.
A week. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
a week is a good number. A week is a good number. And then, I think both for health reasons, or sanitation reasons, but probably also just for like sanity, like you just got to
Yeah.
from the turkey. So
Burnout.
burnout, turkey burnout.
Yeah.
Sure. A friend of mine sent me a picture of like a delicious, like juicy steak on like Tuesday. And he's like, I'm so effing done with turkey.
Right? Oh my God. I didn't have turkey this year. I had ham and stuffing and tiramisu, which is a tradition, but no turkey. So I'll save that for Christmas. So yeah. Anyhow. All right.
So I'm
So
curious, you're calling yourself Dirty Mike these days?
yeah, only because it's Harry's picture. So it harkens to the last pod. Jordan, I'll let you take it away.
Harry was talking about his Tesla being in the shop, and then he referenced the movie The Other Guys and did a whole bit on Dirty Mike and Boys. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's worth checking out.
So,
It's it.
Dirty Mike it is. All right.
Dirty Mike. And, just Dirty Mike is it's just a feel good name, Yeah.
Feel
It
good.
works.
Yeah.
It suits you, Jen. It suits you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, all right, without further ado, here we are rolling into December. Tomorrow is December 1st. So, good time to take stock of the year, right? And I'm sure I don't have to tell you because you read the papes. Craft has had a tough year. I think it's down like 5% in scans. But against that backdrop, how are you guys doing year to date?
We're pretty much following the trends.
Okay.
So I wish we could say better, but in the U.S., we're pretty much following the trends, and it's a mixed bag. We're super happy to see that Brooklyn Lager, our flagship, is actually pretty flat for the year. I don't think there are a lot of flagships that are flat in today's environment, so we're pretty excited about that. Obviously, we put a lot of focus on it this year with this year being the 35th anniversary of the Brooklyn Brewery, and of course, Brooklyn Lager was our very first product, so near and dear to our heart, and the OG is still holding strong.
Yeah.
The IPAs, we're seeing a little bit of softness. I mean, that I think it's kind of across the board, right? I mean, we're following craft. Seasonals have definitely been quite challenging this year. I feel like seasonals once represented diversity for the consumer, right? You sort of look forward to the next seasonal because it was something new in the repertoire. Now you can get any single style you want any time of the year. I think it's no longer filling that role. And so seasonals are definitely a little softer. Bright spots have been, of course, our special effects line. The non-alcoholic line is doing well, particularly our variety pack, and Pilsner, which we had it in the U.S. for a while, and then we DQ'd it and brought it back about a year and a half ago, and that's doing really well. So climbing in the ranks for us, and so that's been a bright spot. And I think lagers in general, I kind of think easier drinking styles are coming back. So I think Pilsner is well positioned in this kind of environment.
Yeah, I've been hearing that lately. A lot of like craft Pilsners seem to be doing well in the tap rooms and that sort of thing. But, we've obviously had a run on IPAs the last few years. That's gotten huge. There was a time where, every different kind of style had its time in the sun, except I feel like craft Pilsners or lagers have never been huge. Do you think maybe it's time that changes?
Yeah, because I think what's happening is, the consumer is changing a little bit, right? I mean, they listen, when craft came of age, the rest of the alcohol world was pretty damn boring, right? Spirits were like something your grandparents drank, and were pretty classic, pretty staid, pretty dusty. Wine was, kind of stodgy and snobby and boring, but now all that's changed, right? And so craft has a lot of flavor competition, if you want to call it that. Spirits have done, really remade themselves into, super sexy and exciting, and always a new flavor and then a new cocktail. And so I think there's a lot of flavor competition there. I think wine still has a ways to go, but I mean, there certainly you're seeing more products like wine-based products in cans and changing their format, making themselves a little bit more accessible. So there's definitely more kind of flavor competition, if you will, from there. So I think people aren't necessarily turning to craft beer for their flavor exploration the way they once were, but beer is still an incredibly refreshing beverage. And what are some of the most refreshing styles? Well, it's the classics, right? The Pilsners, lagers, things like that. So I think there's sort of a renewed appreciation for those styles, which I think kind of makes sense in the world that we live in. When craft first got going, the only thing that was out there was Pilsner, basically, right? So it's like you wanted anything but Pilsner. Now I think the consumer is kind of coming back and getting reacquainted with a style that was, when well made, is really damn nice.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And so that also begs the question too, tends to be lower ABV. Do you think it has something to do with, as well as kind of where craft is right now? Do you think that has something to do with sort of the aging of the huge millennial cohort in it, or what else kind of is ailing craft, do you think?
Well, I certainly think that's part of it. We're not all 21 anymore. And 7.5% IPAs hurt a lot more the next morning than they used to. So that's certainly part of it. I think you're also seeing almost like a bifurcation of ABV. It's like either people want to go all in and they're drinking imperial IPAs and that kind of stuff, or they want something much more sessionable. We are in the social media age, right? And God forbid something gets caught on video or, et cetera, and posted somewhere you don't want it posted. So, people are a lot more careful now. I mean, that's not a bad thing overall for society, but I think there is a lot more sort of mindfulness when it comes to the amount of sort of just straight up alcohol you're consuming, whatever format it's in.
Right.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah. And Jay, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, speaking of mindfulness and lower ABV, and you mentioned the special effects line. Y'all got into non-alc craft beer several years ago, and now it seems like everyone is kind of coming in. Is this a rising tide lifts all boats scenario, or is this a little more concerning, I guess, this flood?
Well, I mean, I think of it as a minor flood, right? I mean, it's not like an IPA flood.
Yeah.
But I think, people are seeing it as one of the few segments that's growing and are trying to jump in. There's non-alcoholic beers are not easy to make well, right? So I think there are a lot of people that are jumping in that are probably going to find it pretty difficult sledding. The shelf is only going to get so big. And I think that pretty soon things are going to get sorted out, and there's going to be, a dozen or so players that are the ones that I think play in that space, is my guess. But do I see a world where there's going to be 500 NA beers in the market? It's kind of tough for me to see right now. But if it becomes 10% of the market, maybe it'll be a different story. But I think we're a long way from that happening. But I think a lot of new segments, a lot of people rush in thinking it's going to be easy, and then discover that it's not quite that simple. And I think a lot of those will fall off, is my guess.
Is that kind of what you see in the total craft landscape? Is that another reason maybe craft has kind of slowed down the past few years? Is it, I guess, a lack of focus on what they have and kind of rushing to these hot spaces?
Yeah, I mean, as Steve Hindy, penned, obviously craft beer had a revolution, right? And the problem with revolutions is that then you win the revolution, and then you have to govern. And governing is a lot harder than revolting.
Yeah.
So craft, it's not an insignificant segment, right? I mean, we're whatever 12-ish% by volume, 20-ish% by value.
Mm-hmm.
We're a fifth of the industry. So it's not like we're some little tiny segment with a bunch of little young upstarts running around anymore. And that's a completely different ballgame, with complete different set of economic pressures and everything else. So, I think we're seeing sort of the inevitable, if you will, life cycle that happens. We also had a huge gold rush over the last, until about 2 years ago, right? I mean, we were growing at 1,000+ brewers a year. I mean, that couldn't happen forever. That had to slow down. So I think it's kind of inevitable. I mean, all these consumer, movements go through their own life cycle, and we're coming to a life cycle, and I think it's going to take several years to kind of sort itself out, and then there'll be a sort of a wave 4, whatever that is. And I also think that craft brewers have to continue to evolve with the consumer, right? I mean, craft beer was a response to a consumer movement, right? It was a response to the desire for something other than just yellow beer. And we answered it, right? But now the consumer has moved on again. And so we have to continue to move with that consumer, or we're going to be faced with, just trying to follow the millennials down that drinking curve until it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So craft brewers, I think, are at a period in time where, we're sort of faced with the challenge of, can we use that entrepreneurial spirit that we have, that willingness to explore new areas, to take some risks, to look at some new areas and follow the consumer and into new places they're concerned about, and see if we can have some success there too.
So it kind of begs the question, and maybe this is just a question of semantics. Do you see yourself fundamentally as a craft brewer, or more, as a CPG producer, right? You have all these partnerships with FX Mat and Hoplark, and, I don't know if you'll be able to talk to me about some of the THC beverages, but what's your mandate then going forward, as the way you see yourself and the kind of products that you want to put forth?
The way I think of it is, our mandate is continue to develop interesting and flavorful products that meet the consumer where they are, right? And like I said before, consumers shifted, and we can't pretend they haven't, right? So I think we have to continue to evolve as a segment if we want to continue to sort of participate in a meaningful way. I mean, listen, there's always going to be just pure craft around at some level, right? But I think just pure craft is going to continue to decline. And just like pure beer, I mean, if you back out all the other sort of non-beer like, or however you want to call them, near beer like innovations that have happened, right? The FMBs and the hard seltzers and everything else, core beer is way down, right? So imagine beer without any hard seltzer FMB.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be in a completely different place. So I think it's kind of the same thing, right? Craft beer has been pretty pure until recently, and it's going to need to shift if it's going to continue to participate with this generation of consumers.
Well, what can you tell us? I think you guys announced a couple months ago this Hoplark partnership, strategic partnership, where you guys, I think, help produce and do some of the sales and admin. Why did you choose this brand? It's a hop tea, right? An NA. And any other details about the partnership? Like, is it going through Brooklyn distributors? What do you see as the run room for it?
Yeah, so stepping back, looking at more broadly at some of the partnerships and the projects we're working on. Talking about the shift to consumer, like where are they now? They're drinking less overall. We know that, right? Younger generation, a much higher percentage don't drink at all. Even older generation is with aging, drinking less. They can care a lot more about sustainability, right? We all know that, and health and wellness has become a lot more important to them, and sort of the non-alcoholic beer is also sort of part of that. So we're sort of trying to respond to each of those, three major areas. So obviously we have special effects going on. In the sustainability world, we're working on two different things. One is we've been working. Garrett has really gotten excited about this grain fonio, which is sub-Saharan ancient grain, miracle grain. You can put whatever name you want on it, but it's been around for thousands and thousands of years. That is sort of making a comeback, right? It's one of those sort of indigenous grains that got driven out by colonialism, and everybody was forced to grow wheat in an environment that wheat doesn't grow. And it's sort of now there are people pushing to bring fonio back as a much healthier, much more sustainable, product for that part of the world. Fonio grows without irrigation, without pesticides, without fertilizer, without fungicides, without all the bad things that we're sort of doing to the environment to grow, a lot of other more mainstream crops like wheat and corn and everything else. It's traditionally it's used as a food product. It's a little bit like couscous, if you will, very fine grain. Turns out it makes an incredible beer. So Garrett's been playing around with it, and we've done a few limited releases now with fonio, together with Carlsberg. We've been doing some more exploration. They actually made a 100% fonio beer for fun in their research labs, and it tastes like a combination between like a sake and Sauvignon Blanc. It was really interesting. Yeah, really tasty. Not traditional beer flavor, but quite interesting. So we've been playing around with blending it into products, mainly sort of like Pilsner forward kind of products. And it's absolutely delicious. So we're going to continue to do more with things like that. We're partnering with a company called Spare Food. If you can come up, sparefood.com, which both has a beverage product, Spare Tonic, which is made from the leftover whey from yogurt making, most of which gets sewered, and they figured out a way to turn it into a delicious and super healthy product. And they also have a food side of the business where they're taking essentially the vegetables that essentially never make it off the farm and finding an end use for them in a really creative way. And then getting around to Hoplark, which you talked about, that really is centering more on sort of the health and wellness area. And what's fascinating to me about Hoplark are two different things. One is that they have completely defied conventional wisdom with how they are able to use hops. So their founder, he's a process engineer. He wasn't a brewer, but he loved hops. And during a time when he had decided to take a break from drinking alcohol, he was really missing hops and started playing around with different ways of using it. And because he didn't know any better, he just tried a bunch of stuff that in theory you're not supposed to do. And he managed to make them work. So he's getting this incredible hop flavor and aroma into water, which, extracting into water is not supposed to be very easy to do. Well, he's figured out a way to do it really, really well. And in so doing, he has taken a traditional beer ingredient and moved it out of the beer aisle, right? We're all stuck right now in the beer world playing in the beer aisle. Even the non-alcoholic beer is still in the beer aisle, right? So we're all still fighting in that one aisle. But they've taken a beer ingredient into a different part of the supermarket. And that to me is super exciting because it really opens up the possibilities for where we as brewers can go, meeting consumers at a completely different day part, completely different drinking occasion, and making an absolutely delicious product. It turns out that hops and tea blend really well. They're making what they call a 000 product, right? So it's 0 sugar, 0 alcohol, 0 calories. You would swear there's sugar in it.
Yeah.
And it's just that interaction of the hops and the tea that really play well together and give you the perception of sweetness when there is none.
Right.
So it's sort of that, that perfect health and wellness product. But also, even more exciting is that they're stepping outside of the beer aisle. And I think that's, as we go forward, figuring out ways to expand our horizons, it's going to be super important. And then this hop technology they've developed, is also quite interesting. It promises to potentially totally revolutionize how we use hops in brewing as well. So there's a whole technology side of the business that we're working with as well. And hopefully by middle of next year, we're going to be using that in our beer products as well.
So I was going to ask, is that something you guys would license, or no, you would just keep that for yourself?
I mean, we don't own the whole company. We're just an investor in the company and partner. But we work with them to develop that whole side of the business for sure.
I think Jen mentioned something about THC beverages as well. Is that something you can talk about?
Yeah, loosely. I mean, a little bit. I mean, it's nothing under the Brooklyn brand name. We actually are partners with the guy who's got the license #1 to grow cannabis in New York State. In addition to selling, flour and vapes and other stuff, gummies, et cetera, they were also interested in doing a beverage. So we met them through FX Matt and got talking, and so we've sort of formed a three-way partnership where we developed a new brand, and the guys at the cannabis grower, he handles everything. It's all done through his license and everything else. We've just provided sort of marketing support and product formulation and that kind of stuff. So it's been kind of fun. So obviously the New York State cannabis market is an absolute shit show at the moment. Cannabis is everywhere, but there are only 25 licensed stores open right now, but you would swear there are thousands.
Yeah.
So we're only selling through legal channels, but we actually have pretty good market share in those stores. We're getting great reviews for the product, and where there are legal stores, and it's selling really well. So as that market continue to expand, I think there's an interesting opportunity there. And I think the jury was out for a long time as to whether cannabis was going to be competition, but I think people are starting to realize that it is. And so for us, it was a way of kind of keeping one foot in that world too, so that if it is going to provide competition, then let's participate and let's learn and be knowledgeable and see where things go.
Was there a noticeable difference that you saw once cannabis dispensaries started popping up and it was full legal in the state?
I mean, it's hard to say. You could draw like a straight data point where you could see the inflection where things changed, if you will. Yeah. I think it's part of the general kind of challenge that BevAlc in general has right now, is that there's sort of a fourth competitor. Right before there were 3 and now there are 4. And it's not like cannabis is new. It's been around forever, obviously, but I think as it becomes more open and kind of acceptable and legalization as part of that, it does become an alternative, right? We know younger people are drinking less, smoking cigarettes less, but they're consuming more cannabis, right? And that's sort of a new generation coming up for whom cannabis is seen as less bad for you, is safer, less threatening in many ways, both for like personal safety and health and wellness and other things. So, it is going to present a challenge to alcoholic beverages in general as we go forward. So might as well kind of learn about it and participate.
I think a lot of brewers are thinking the same way. But in your market, it's not able to go through Brooklyn distributors, or it is?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not. No, it's strictly through our cannabis partner, and
Got
he
it.
handles everything, all the sales, all the distribution, everything else, and it's strictly through the 25 licensed stores that are open at the moment, and hopefully soon there'll be more, and they'll be able to keep expanding.
Right. And that's called Tune, right? Or is that
Soon, yep.
okay? Cool,
Yep.
cool. And then just kind of while we're on the question of distribution, the Hoplark that goes through Brooklyn distributors, or you guys are still trying to figure that out, or?
I mean, we had a number in common already. So I think about roughly half our distributors were in common, and a little bit higher percentage of the total volume. They're also playing in a different channel that doesn't go through beer distributors at all, right? So they have 3 different products. They have their hop teas, they have their hop waters, and then their 0.0 product. So right now, the 0.0 product is the only one that's going through the beer distribution channel, right? So that's their version of a non-alcoholic beer. The other 2 products, the hop water and the hop teas, are going through the non-alcoholic beverage distribution world, right? So it's the Unifies and the KEs and that whole world, right? Which is a completely different ball game that we're learning a lot about very quickly.
Yeah.
And it's slotting fees and that whole world, right? Which we don't participate. Thankfully we don't have to deal with in the alcoholic beverage world. But now we're playing in the same channel as everybody else, where all those things are illegal, right? So it's all the, like I said, slotting fees and post offs and discounts and billbacks, and it's a very complicated world.
Yep. And then is it a challenge, dealing with a different buyer for some of these products?
Completely different buyer. Yes, absolutely. Completely different buyer. So, and it's a different kind of sale. Like, in beer, the margin's a margin, and that's it, right? You can't build back. You can't, there's all these things you can't do, right? Because it's all through the 3-tier system. So it's a very different kind of sale. So we're rapidly coming up to speed on that. Hoplark has a team already, and they also work with brokers. So they're focusing mainly on that area with our support, on everything else in the background, while we focus on the beer distributors with the 0.0 product. And we do think there are opportunities with both the hop water and the hop teas through the beer distribution channel eventually, but we're just a couple of months into this, so we're sort of feeling our way through it, and we'll figure out what makes sense. But I do think that there is the non-alcoholic distribution channel does, they do really well in certain areas and less well in other areas. And certainly when you start getting into a lot of the independents, and the Northeast is full of independent stores, that could be an area where beer distributors actually play a role. So I could see a sort of a hybrid setup going forward, where certain channels are handled by the KEs and Unifies, and other channels are handled by beer distributors. But we'll figure that out as we go along here. So,
I wanted to ask, knowing the reach of your company, we know non-alc beer is big overseas, but have you seen anything like Hoplark or these hop waters overseas? And do you think there's, not asking you if you're going to take them overseas, but do you see an opportunity there for brands like this?
Absolutely. I mean, with our experience internationally, we always have an eye to, what could work overseas. The stuff that the team at Spare Food are doing definitely has applicability overseas. Hoplark for sure. We're already in discussions about maybe looking at a 2025 launch in a couple of countries, just to see. Again, because we have a lot of experience and a lot of partners, on the production side, you definitely want to produce this overseas, not produce it in the US and ship it. And we're well set up to do that. So we definitely want to leverage all that experience we have with other products as well. And, every market is a little bit different, right? So like take the UK, you're like, oh, it's a huge tea market, right? Well, they don't drink cold tea. They only drink hot tea.
Brown water.
Yeah, exactly. So so that that might be a little bit of a different challenge. On the other hand, countries like the Nordics, like Sweden, etc., they do drink iced tea, and there's also sort of a little bit of a lack of sort of adult non-alcoholic beverage products, right? I mean, it's adults don't drink a lot of soda in Scandinavia, and it's like, well, so what else do you drink if you're not drinking? So I do think there are some opportunities there for products like Hoplark.
Yeah, globally, I mean, you guys are doing probably a little bit better globally than you are in the US right now, total business.
Oh yeah,
right?
no, international is flying. I mean, we'll
Okay.
as a company, we'll end up roughly probably 25% for the year. So yeah, doing really well overseas. Our partnership with Carlsberg and Kieran is doing very well. So yeah, thankfully we have, we have sort of our feet in many different areas, so it's able to, keep driving sales in the right direction, even if the US is a little soft.
Yeah. And do you do more volume overseas or?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Got
absolutely. It's by far the biggest part of the company right now, and growing much more rapidly, obviously.
Right.
So
crazy. So you're on a plane all the time.
a little less than pre-COVID. I think we've all gotten a little smarter about being able to do stuff remotely. I mean, just like we are right now. This can't replace everything. There's still nothing quite like sitting down over a beer in a pub with somebody or a bar or restaurant. But I think we figured out that there's a lot of other stuff that we can do remotely. So, whereas before I was probably on the road every 2 to 3 weeks, now I'm doing 5 or 6 trips a year. So,
oh, wow.
it's probably a third of what I used to do.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Do you miss it, or you're missing your points and your perks?
Well, not being part of the double ultra secret, whatever you want to call it, top club on United. Yeah, sometimes you miss the not being taken care of or being taken care of that way, but it's a lot healthier to be around home more than I was before. So my wife's happy to see me, although sometimes she's like, wait, shouldn't you be on a trip now already? Can't you get lost? So
why are you still here? Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a much better balance. It's a much better balance.
Good. Anything else? Oh, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, I had one more I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask about draft, how that's doing in the US, and then if it's, bounced back any better overseas, or if you've seen any sort of difference between.
Yeah, no, it definitely bounced back much better overseas overall than it has in the US, certainly for us. So, I mean, we haven't caught up to our pre-COVID numbers in the US with draft, not even close. Whereas overseas, we're probably 25-30% past it.
Wow.
Yeah, we've seen things rebound much more quickly in Europe. I feel like Europe, they did do the sort of that in many countries, they really did do that heavy lockdown for a while. But then they kind of bounced back to more normal much more quickly than we did in this country, certainly in the big cities. I think there's obviously a big difference between, north, south, red state, blue state, big city, more rural, suburban, certainly in the US. But I mean, most of the big cities in the US haven't, they're still at 50-60% of, sort of office occupancy. Whereas in Europe, it's like 80%, 80-90%. It's back to pretty normal. So I was in London 2 weeks ago, and wow, I mean, it was just amazing, like just buzzing, vibrant, people out everywhere, bars overflowing. Like it felt so different than New York right now. So it was very refreshing to see.
Just, I guess, a different culture, right? Or
yeah, I mean, of course, you can't necessarily compare different countries, because there are very different cultures, right? So the UK's always had that very strong, like post work, stop by the pub for a pint or two before you go home or go on to something else. And it's not to say that we didn't have that in the US, but I feel like we lost a lot of that, and it hasn't really come back as much in the US. Whereas I think in the UK, it almost bounced back almost even more aggressively. Like people really miss that. And now it's like they make a point of stopping by and getting back to that more normal socialization. Whereas here, I feel like between the fact that people are working at home a lot more, but I also feel like the sort of the homework divide has gotten a lot starker, right? There's a lot less interest in like hanging out after work with your colleagues or your, and all that, and going and grabbing a beer, and more like, nope, all right, work's done, I'm getting on to something else. And So it definitely feels like there's been a shift here that's feeling more permanent. At least, I mean, we're what, three years into this now. So I mean, I don't know how long it takes before we accept that it's actually changed, as opposed to it's some, period that's going to eventually revert. Whereas I sort of feel like in Europe, like that they sort of left that behind and they bounce right back. So,
Yeah. Well, on that note, anything else for 24? As if you don't have enough on your plate.
Yeah, no, I mean, we do have a lot going on. I mean, obviously, a lot of these partnerships are quite new and are evolving and pretty exciting. Specifically, what we're not doing in 24 is coming out with a whole bunch of new innovations, right? And I think that era is winding down. I think there's still people that are trying to do that and still coming out with 3-4 new products every year. But I think the shelf space is getting cut back, not expanded. And I think across the entire system, people are looking to focus more. We're actually seeing better success, if you will, with our OGs. We're bringing brown ale back, which, brown ale was our second product we ever made. And then brown ale is kind of like, we're a thing of the past. And so we, except for a couple of draft accounts, we got rid of it. And now we're bringing it back. So it's our spring seasonal, and then next year it'll be our combination winter and spring. And we'll go to 3 seasonals instead of 4. But we're super excited about that. We're seeing excitement in some of the OGs. East IPA, same thing, is doing better than some of our other IPAs, and lager hanging in there, and Pilsner. So a lot of these kind of classic flavors we feel like are coming back. So we're almost sort of circling back and doubling down on some existing brands, rather than trying to come up with, yet the latest IPA or whatever it is. And it's not to say that there will not be a role for innovation going forward. I think there will be, but I think it's going to have to be much more thoughtful, much more sort of tested, and proven before you launch things, as opposed to a little bit of the throwing the spaghetti at the wall, which is what many of us, ourselves included, did for many years, just because in a growing environment, you kind of could do that, right? Now you have to be much more thoughtful and deliberate, and I hate to say corporate, but you got to take your time and really study the market and consumer test, and make sure the packaging is working, and just be much more deliberate about what you're doing, so that the innovations that you do launch are sort of more fully baked when you put them out there. So we're definitely taking our time to do that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I have heard from a lot of distributors and retailers that this is going to be a big SKU rationalization year. Now, I feel like we've said that a lot over the last few years, so we'll see, but I'm definitely hearing that. Just one more for me. Is that Fonio beer, is that going everywhere, or is that?
No, so that's, again, we'll do limited release again in
Okay.
24. I think we're doing 2 different limited releases, if I'm not mistaken. But then looking to do potentially something with a full launch in 25.
Okay, cool.
But again, speaking about taking our time to really understand and study, that's what we're doing. We're already working on, like, we finished 24 like 5 months ago.
Yeah.
Working on 25 ever since, and we're still in 23.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a kind of thinking ahead that I think we need to do now. We're trying to be a lot more, like I said, really deliberate and thorough before we launch. Like, it's not to say everything we do is going to work, but I think in this kind of environment, in order to give something a fighting chance, you really have to do your homework. So
right. Absolutely.
Taking our time to do that, and it won't be long before we're thinking about 26 already. So
oh my gosh, I don't know how you keep your years straight.
Yeah,
don't make any reservations, because they might end up in the wrong year. That's happened to me.
Exactly.
Yeah. All
Cool.
right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll can't wait to get back there to Brooklyn. I was actually there a couple weeks ago, and that was nice. So
Did you come see us?
I did.
Robin, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Yeah.
we chatted for a while, and then I walked down the street to Talea, and
Nice.
no, it was a nice day. It was perfect. Yeah. Yep. Good stuff.
Well, always let us know when you're in town.
Will do. Awesome. Thank you so
Thanks,
much for
Eric.
the time. Yep.
You
Cheers.
all.
See you in the new year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.